My name is Jonah, and I'm 27 years old. Thanksgiving has always been a complicated holiday for me. Not because of the food is always great. My Aunt Diane makes a stuffing that could solve wars, and Grandma's cranberry tart could probably bring someone back from the brink of death. No, Thanksgiving is hard because it means going back to a house filled with people who seem allergic to treating me like I exist. My family's always had a knack for twisting the knife with a smile. Sometimes they don't even bother with the smile. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The one who read books instead of starting fights. The one who helped clean up after dinner while my brother, Mason, threw footballs indoors and broke things without consequence. I didn't demand attention. I didn't cause trouble. And somehow, that made me forgettable. Or maybe just easier to disregard. I moved out at 19 and tried not to look back. I lived in a crumbling apartment above a laundromat, took night classes, and worked mornings unloading trucks. I didn't have much, but it was mine. Meanwhile, Mason lived at home until he was 25, went through 3 job phases, and crashed 2 cars. My parents still call him our miracle. When I finally finished my degree and got a job in publishing, my dream job, even if the pay barely covered rent, the most I got from Dad was a half nod and, "So you read stuff for money now?" Still, every year, I came home for Thanksgiving. I'd show up on time, bring a bottle of wine, even though no one ever drank it, smile at the door, laugh at their jokes, pretend like last year hadn't happened, when they forgot to send me the invite and posted group photos online with captions like, "Just the family this year, 2 hearts." Mason swore it was an accident. My mom said, "You would have been bored anyway." Dad just shrugged. I never pushed. I told myself I didn't need them to like me, but I still kept showing up, hoping something would change. This year, I arrived 10 minutes early. The air smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon rolls. Through the window, I could already see Mason in the living room, passing around his new baby girl like a trophy. My niece. I'd only seen her once, briefly, at the hospital, and that had felt like a drive-by glance. They didn't want me holding her. Said she was too fragile. I stepped inside and smiled. My mom looked over from the kitchen, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, "Jonah, we didn't think you'd come this year. Not glad you're here. Not even a fake hug. Just surprise, like I was some ghost who'd wandered in uninvited." I handed her the bottle of wine. Of course I came. Her eyes flicked to the label. Oh, red. Mason came around the corner, baby in one arm, grinning. "Jonah, my man, you remember how to drive out here?" I smiled, playing along. Barely. The house looked mostly the same. Same beige carpet, same framed photos of Mason at every life milestone. First steps, first touchdown, high school prom, wedding day. If I existed in their memories, it was always on the edge of the frame. I followed the voices into the dining room and froze. There were 2 tables. The main one, long, elegant, with the white cloth and the gold-trimmed china, had all the adult seats filled with name cards. Aunt Diane, Uncle Mark, Grandma, Mom, Dad, Mason, his wife, a few cousins. And then, off to the side, near the kitchen entrance, was a smaller table with brightly colored plastic cups, paper napkins, and cartoon-themed plates. I saw 3 kids already seated there, 2 cousins and Mason's daughter in a high chair. And then, next to the high chair, another name card. Jonah. I blinked. Thought maybe it was a mistake. I looked over at Dad, who was pouring himself a drink. Dad, why is my seat over there?" He didn't even look up. "Because grown-ups contribute. You just exist." The words hit like ice water. Mason snorted behind him. "We should have uninvited you like last year. Less awkward for everyone." There was laughter from the living room. I didn't turn to see who joined in. I just stood there, frozen in place, my jaw tight. I felt heat crawling up my neck. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just nodded, slow and quiet. "Right," I said. "Makes sense." I stepped out of the room and walked back to the hallway, ignoring the pity glance from my aunt and the shrug from my cousin. My hands were trembling as I opened my messenger bag and pulled out the manila folder I'd been carrying for 3 weeks. I'd thought, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't need it. Maybe this year would be different. But of course it wasn't. I walked back to the dining room, crossed the hardwood floor slowly, and slid the folder onto the middle of the main table, right between the gravy boat and the bowl of cranberry sauce. My mom paused mid-sentence. Dad narrowed his eyes. Mason looked confused. "What's this?" Mom asked. I didn't answer. I just went to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and sat down at the kids' table. I didn't touch the paper plate in front of me. I didn't speak. The room behind me was still for about 10 seconds, and then it started. My mom opened the folder first. She gasped so loud you could hear it echo down the hallway. "What is this?" she snapped. My aunt leaned over to look. Her face went pale. She whispered, "Oh my God." Grandma stood slowly, took the folder in her shaking hands, and read one of the printed pages. Then another. Then another. By the time she got to the third page, she sat back down hard in her chair, staring straight ahead, whispering, "Please tell me this isn't real." My dad's face turned red. Not with anger, with fear. I watched him from the corner of my eye as he reached for one of the documents and scanned it quickly. His lips were moving, silently counting lines. Mason stood up, voice tight. "What kind of game is this, Jonah?" Still, I said nothing. My cousin asked, "What's going on?" No one answered him. No one moved. It was like the room forgot how to breathe. My mom stood up, slammed her hands on the table, and shouted, "You've ruined everything." I took a sip of water. The truth is, I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't come here hoping for chaos. But I also didn't come here to be humiliated. Not again. Not after everything they said. Not after everything they did. I'd spent years being silent. The quiet one, the easy one, the one they could ignore. But not anymore. They wanted to pretend I didn't exist. Now they wouldn't be able to pretend anything. That was the moment Mason walked over, grabbed my arm, and hissed through clenched teeth, "What did you do?" I looked up at him, calm as I could manage. "You'll see." And just as Grandma began to cry, loud, real, aching sobs that made everyone turn, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the folder now lying open like a bomb on the dinner table, and waited. Mason's grip on my arm tightened, but I didn't flinch. He'd always thought strength was in the wrist, in how hard you could clench, how loud you could yell. I knew better. Strength was silence when they expected you to scream, calm when they were unraveling. He leaned in, voice low. "Is this about the money? The house? Is this some pathetic little tantrum because you're jealous?" I looked at him, finally, and said one thing, "No. This is about the truth." He scoffed, but there was a crack in it now. Like he knew, somewhere in his chest, that whatever I'd brought to the table, it wasn't a bluff. I pulled my arm free and turned back to my plate. The mashed potatoes were cold. The gravy had congealed. Behind me, the room was fraying fast. My aunt was shaking her head, flipping through the documents in the folder. "This can't be real. This can't be real." "It's a mistake," my dad said, standing up now. "This is fake. This is forged, probably downloaded off the internet." Grandma didn't say a word. She was still holding the page with both hands, her lips pressed into a thin, colorless line. The kind of look you only see on someone who's seen their whole version of the world collapse in one breath. My mom turned to me. "Where did you get this? Who gave you these?" I shrugged. "It's public record. You just have to know what to look for." "And where?" That wasn't entirely true. Some of it was public, yes. Property records, tax filings, those were easy. But some of it took time. Months of digging. Hiring someone to track connections I couldn't trace on my own. I hadn't planned to use it. I kept telling myself I just wanted the option. That having it was enough. But then they stuck me at the kids' table, next to a high chair. Like I was a burden. Like I was 6 years old. I guess I finally believed the truth deserved air. Mason was pacing now. "This is ridiculous. It's not even your business. What do you care if if we," he caught himself, too late. My cousin, the youngest of the adults, tilted her head. "If you what?" Mason went still. And that's when my mom cracked. She lunged for the folder, grabbed one of the thicker documents, the last page, and tried to tear it in half. Her hands were shaking so bad, she missed the seam. It crumpled instead. Her voice was shrill now. "You had no right. No right." Grandma stood. "Stop." The whole room fell silent. Grandma, who never raised her voice, who used to shush even the turkey for being too loud, was staring at my mother with a look I hadn't seen since I was a kid. She was holding a document in one hand and her glasses in the other. Her voice was quiet, but cut through the air like a bell. "This says the house deed was changed in 2009. Transferred to Mason and Diane, without a sale. Just signed over. After Jonah moved out." My dad stepped forward. "That was our decision." "No," Grandma snapped. "That was my house. I gave it to you and Laura on the condition it stay in the family. All of the family. Jonah included." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just kept my hands folded in my lap while the room slowly turned inward. My mom sat down suddenly, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. My Aunt Diane was whispering something to her husband that I couldn't hear. Mason looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. He walked over, arms crossed. So what? You ruined dinner just to make some point. I looked up at him calm. This isn't about dinner. This is about everything. The lies. The favoritism. The fact that you used my name on the loan for your second car. That you signed me as a guarantor without asking. That you listed my social security number on the credit card application for your failed home gym business. The one that tanked my credit for 4 years. Mason's face drained of color. I paid it off, he muttered. I know. Last year. After I spent thousands trying to fix it. Aunt Diane was crying now. My uncle had stood up, one hand on his hip, the other clenching his napkin into a tight knot. My mom looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Grandma slowly sat back down, her eyes locked on the folder. And you let them do this? She asked, not looking at anyone in particular. You all let this happen? You let him carry this, while you handed everything else to Mason like he was owed it. No one answered. The room had gone quiet again. My dad finally muttered. He's always been too sensitive. No, Grandma interrupted. He's always been too alone. The silence after that was thick, heavy. No one seemed to know what to say. A few people stood up and wandered out to the hallway. My cousin took her kids upstairs, murmuring about cartoons. The clinking of silverware had stopped completely. Even the baby in the high chair had fallen asleep, her tiny hands curled around a plush carrot. Mason was still staring at me. I met his gaze. He shook his head. You think this makes you look good? You think this makes you better than us? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, I said, but it makes me seen. And in that moment, I swear he realized something. Not about the documents, not about the money, but about me. That I wasn't the kid he'd mocked for being boring. That I wasn't just background noise at the table. That maybe, just maybe, I'd been keeping a lot more in silence than they ever gave me credit for. The front door creaked open. Someone was leaving. Maybe more than one. My mom was still frozen, her fingers pressed to her lips like she was praying or trying not to scream. My dad poured another drink with a trembling hand. Grandma picked up the folder again, her expression unreadable. And I just sat there, at the kids' table, waiting. No one said anything for a long while. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace, more like pressure. Like a storm you can't hear, but your bones know it's coming. Grandma was thumbing through the documents with the care of someone handling something radioactive, stopping now and then to read a line or a signature. My mother hadn't moved. She looked stunned, not like someone caught red-handed, but like someone seeing, for the first time, the fallout of all the little things they convinced themselves didn't matter. I was still at the kids' table. My knees barely fit under it, and the plastic cup in front of me was cartoon-themed, a leftover from Mason's daughter's birthday, probably. But I didn't move. I wanted them to feel the contrast. Me in this absurd little chair while the folder sat like a time bomb in front of them. Mason took a step toward it again, maybe thinking he could control the narrative if he just got to it first. But Grandma slid the folder closer to her without looking up. A clear message, don't touch it. This isn't yours anymore. He stopped mid-step and swore under his breath, not loud, but enough that everyone heard. Then, because Mason can never help himself, he turned to me and said, You always have to make things dramatic. You could have just talked to us. I gave a short, breathless laugh. Talk to you? You mean like last Thanksgiving when I asked you to take my name off the gym loan and you told me, and I quote, Don't be such a girl about it? Or the year before that, when I wasn't invited to Christmas because, apparently, you accidentally sent the wrong address, even though you've had the same phone number for a decade. That wasn't personal, he muttered. No, I said, my voice sharper now. It never is. It's never personal when it happens to me. Aunt Diane whispered something again, but this time it was louder. I told you this would come back to bite us. My dad slammed his glass down. That's enough. But no one was listening to him anymore. The power dynamic had shifted, and he didn't know how to get it back. For years, he'd been the center of every room he walked into. He was the kind of man who thought being firm made him fair, who believed being feared meant he was respected. I used to flinch at the sound of his voice clearing across the table. But now he just looked tired. Like someone watching a chess game where he didn't see the checkmate coming until the king was already tipped over. Grandma finally spoke again, her voice brittle but clear. Is this everything, Jonah? I nodded. Everything I could find without access to their private files. She didn't ask how long I'd been working on it. Didn't ask how much I spent on legal copies, background checks, or consultations. She didn't need to. She just looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like years. And she nodded once, solemn and slow. My mom finally stirred. Her voice was thin and uneven. This was a family dinner. You brought poison into our house on Thanksgiving. I leaned forward slightly. No, you built the house out of poison. I just opened a window. There was a rustling near the hall. One of my cousins, Jonah, I think, was on her phone, typing rapidly, whispering something to her husband. They both looked visibly uncomfortable, like they wanted to evaporate. I didn't blame them. This wasn't a show they signed up for. Most of them were bystanders. But bystanders who laughed at the jokes made at my expense, who shrugged when my name was missing, who never spoke up. And now, the lights were all on, and the curtain was down, and there were no more laughs left to be had. Grandma finally stood again, a bit slower this time. She picked up the folder, held it against her chest, and looked at each person at the table, one by one. I will be speaking to a lawyer this week, she said. My dad opened his mouth to object, but she raised her hand. No, you had your chance. All of you did. Jonah was always here. He came to every dinner, every birthday. He brought gifts. He sent thank you cards. He offered help even when no one asked. And you all treated him like a shadow, like he was something stuck to the bottom of your shoe. She turned to Mason. And you used your own brother like a stepping stone. And for what? Another car? A doomed business you didn't even believe in. He stared at the floor. You may not like the way Jonah told the truth, she said, her voice shaking now. But don't you dare be angry at him for telling it. The room was dead quiet again. Even the kitchen appliances seemed to be holding their breath. I looked down at the kids' table, at the smudged cartoon plate, and the half-full sippy cup in front of the high chair. I thought about the years I'd spent showing up, quietly enduring, telling myself that family meant patience, even when it hurt. That if I just kept going, kept giving, eventually they'd see me, appreciate me. But sometimes, the only way to be seen is to stop being silent. The sound of footsteps drew everyone's attention. My cousin Jonah and her husband were putting on their coats. She looked at me with something like apology in her eyes. Thanks for the honesty, she said, her voice quiet. It explains a lot. They walked out without saying another word to anyone else. Mason sat down heavily in his chair and stared blankly at his cold plate. My mother looked like she wanted to scream, but had forgotten how. My dad lit another cigarette, something he hadn't done indoors in years, and stared out the window like he couldn't recognize his own reflection in the glass. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked from the awkward angle under the tiny table. No one tried to stop me. No one asked where I was going. And just as I reached the hallway, I heard Grandma say, "Wait." I turned. She held the folder out. "You take this. You earned the right to hold it." I didn't argue. I walked over, took it gently from her hands, and looked around the room one last time. "I hope you all have a good dinner," I said, without irony. And then I stepped out the door, into the cold November air, the folder tucked under my arm like a shield, or maybe a map, finally free of the house where I'd been invisible for far too long. I didn't drive straight home. I sat in my car for a while, the engine off, the cold bleeding through the windshield in thin sheets of ice. The street was quiet except for the rustle of wind against dry leaves and the muffled sound of kids playing somewhere down the block. The folder lay on the passenger seat beside me, the top slightly curled where Grandma had held it. It didn't feel like a weapon anymore, or a secret, just the truth. Finally out. I thought I'd feel triumphant, liberated maybe, but instead, I just felt empty, tired in a way that went deeper than my bones. It was like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally let it out, only to realize I didn't know how to breathe normally anymore. Still, I didn't regret it. Not for a second. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 2 days later, I got a call from Grandma. I almost didn't answer. Part of me thought she might ask me to take it all back, smooth things over, act like it was a moment of bad judgment on both sides. But when I picked up, all she said was, "Can you come over this week? I want to go over some things with you." I drove out on Thursday afternoon. Her house smelled the same as it always had, lemon polish and cinnamon and thyme. She didn't waste it on small talk. We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us, and she laid out a small stack of documents of her own. I've changed the will, she said. Half of everything now goes to you. The house, the savings account, the paintings upstairs. I've also set up a trust that bypasses your parents entirely. They won't have access. Mason either. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't asked for any of this. But when I looked at her face, I saw it. Not guilt, exactly, but something sharper. A kind of clarity that comes too late to fix everything, but still demands action. I can't undo what I let happen, she said softly. But I can make sure they don't get rewarded for it. I nodded slowly. Thank you. We talked for a while after that. About everything and nothing. I told her about work, and she asked me to bring her one of the books I'd helped publish. When I left, she hugged me tighter than she ever had before. It felt like a closing, not an ending, but a chapter sealed. News traveled fast through the family. Within a week, my parents stopped responding to my messages. Not that I was sending many. Mason texted me a single line. You got what you wanted. Happy now. I didn't answer. I heard through Jenna that the fallout was bad. Thanksgiving had fractured something permanent. Aunt Diane apparently broke down at dinner the following Sunday, sobbing about being betrayed. My mom refused to talk to Grandma. My dad drank more. Mason, for the first time in his life, was being asked to pay for things himself. The car, the house repairs, even the baby's upcoming birthday party. They all tried to blame each other. But none of them reached out to me again. And that, strangely, was the peace I'd been chasing. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just silence. A silence I chose. 3 months later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email, a real letter in my mother's handwriting. It was short. Jonah, we never expected you to turn on us like this. We raised you. We gave you everything. I hope you realize what you've done to this family. You've ruined it. Mom. I stared at the page for a long time. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of anything she or Dad had done. Just the usual script. I was the villain for reacting, not them for acting. I didn't write back. Instead, I filed it in the folder. Not out of spite, but because someday, when I forget why I distanced myself, when the guilt creeps in, as it always does, I'll need the reminder. That even after being handed the evidence, the hurt, the truth in black and white, my mother still saw me as the problem. Spring came slowly that year, but when it did, it bloomed everywhere. I moved into a new apartment, finally upgrading from the cracked windows and creaky floors of my old place. Nothing fancy, but mine, paid for with my own money, furnished with pieces I picked out, built, assembled with care. I planted a little basil in the window box, signed up for a writing workshop downtown, started biking on weekends. I lived freely, quietly. My circle was smaller now, tighter, cleaner. A couple of close friends. My coworkers. Jenna, who reached out again to say she'd cut contact with Mason too. Said watching the Thanksgiving meltdown forced her to reevaluate everything. We grabbed coffee one weekend. Talked like cousins. Real ones. And Grandma and I talked every Sunday now. She asked for help with groceries, sometimes. Sometimes not. I brought her books. She told me stories I'd never heard before. Stories she said she always meant to tell, but life gets noisy. We sat on her porch in the sun. She'd ask, "You still writing?" And I'd smile. Trying to. She always nodded like that was enough. And maybe it was. The last time I saw Mason was 6 months after Thanksgiving. At the grocery store, of all places. He didn't see me at first. Just walked down the aisle with a cart and a distracted look. A stain on his shirt. A toddler in the seat, fussy and loud. I stood still, waiting. Part of me thought he'd ignore me. Another part hoped he would. But when he finally looked up and spotted me, he froze. There was a beat, just one, before he said, "Jonah." "Mason." We stood there, 2 grown men in the cereal aisle, surrounded by cartoon mascots and discount tags. For a second, it felt like we were kids again. Before it all went wrong. Before everything became a contest or a test. He sighed. "I didn't think you'd, well. Doesn't matter." He looked tired. Really tired. "Things are harder now," he added, glancing at his daughter. "With money. With everything." I didn't say anything. He waited. Like maybe I'd offer help. Or guilt. Or sympathy. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Life catches up. He looked like he wanted to argue. Or confess. Or maybe just explain away 1,000 choices he'd made without ever considering the cost. But in the end, he didn't say anything else. Just turned his card and walked away. And I let him. Because some chapters don't need a closing sentence. Just a clean page after. It's been almost a year now. Thanksgiving is coming around again. I won't be going back. I've made new plans, dinner with a few friends, chosen family. People who ask how I'm doing and wait for the answer. People who say my name with warmth, not wait. I still have the folder. It lives in a drawer in my bedroom, under a few old notebooks and utility bills. I don't open it anymore. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it no longer defines me. The truth set me free. And sometimes, freedom looks like an empty seat at someone else's table and a full one at your own. So here I am, cooking in my own kitchen, laughing at bad jokes, filling glasses, passing plates. And for the first time in a long, long time, I am home.